In our first church, my first year in this little country town where we served, I said, hey, let's have a Good Friday service. And the elderberries, as I called them, the church leaders, they said, oh, we don't do Good Friday service. And I said, why not? And they named another denomination in town that had a Good Friday service. And I said, oh, do we combine and go to their service? No, we don't believe the same thing. So I said, so because they have a Good Friday service is reason why we should not have one. And they kind of hemmed and hawed. And I said, can we just try it 1 year? If it doesn't work, then we won't have it anymore. And they reluctantly agreed. And so I went out early to the church, and there was a guy named Charlie who always fired up the furnace, and he tried to get the temperature just right. This Easter was early this year. It was in March, and it was cold in Illinois. And I removed all signs of life out of our auditorium, all the plants, everything. And after Charlie left, I turned the thermostat way, way down. People showed up that evening. They were cold. They were complaining. They're like, what is this, a tomb? And I just kind of silently smiled because that's exactly the atmosphere I was trying to create. And there was no sermon that night. We sang hymns about the crucifixion of Jesus. We interspersed that with different people reading Scripture. And at the end of that service, I simply said, what a tragic way for a great man to die. It's just heartbreaking, isn't it? And I closed my Bible and I walked out the center aisle and I turned right and I went and I got in my office and I just sat there. I'm sure people expected me to make a U-turn and come in and go, but he didn't stay dead. He was raised from the dead. But that doesn't happen until Sunday morning. That's what we celebrate on Easter. Eventually I heard murmuring and I heard people begin to get up and I heard the door open. I heard a few cars start. And then here came the three elders. They knocked on my door. They came in the office. They sat down and they just kind of sat there looking at me. And I said, what's up, guys? And they go, what was that? I go, what do you mean? They go, you can't tell half the story. You left him dead. He doesn't stay dead. I said, guys, on that Friday, that's all the story there was. That's all the story there was. And one of the guys, he was one of my dearest friends in the church, he goes, then why do we call it Good Friday? Because I think right now, the way I feel, we ought to call it really lousy, terrible Friday. That's exactly where we're supposed to be on this day emotionally. We ought to be thankful that Jesus died in our place, but I think we ought to also feel the seriousness of that, the sorrow that comes from that. And I would invite you to read John chapters 18 and chapter 19. Jesus, remember, he said, let's leave the upper room and let's go. And he continues teaching along the way. But eventually he is betrayed. And then he's put on trial, 6 different trials, 3 by religious authorities, 3 by civil authorities. Rome is where we get our concept of justice and due process. All that was set aside. These trials were a mockery of justice. And eventually Jesus is tortured. He's beaten. A crown of thorns is put on his head. And ultimately he's put on a Roman cross, the worst form of capital punishment I think the world has ever created. And there he is hanging between 2 thieves as if he's just a common criminal. Even Pilate recognized, this man, I find no fault in him. But the people, especially stirred up by the religious leaders, said, no, we want him put to death. Crucify him. And there on the cross, after suffering for hours, we finally get to the point in time when the end has finally come. We read about this all in chapters 18 and 19. John chapter 19, verse 28 says this, later, knowing that all was now completed, so that the scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, I am thirsty. A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. No one took Jesus' life from him. He wasn't just alive. He is the very definition, the source of life. It's through his word that the whole world was created. No one took his life from him. He sacrificed his life, and he released his spirit. His suffering was finally over. As you read John chapter 18 and 19, and maybe you'll even want to look at the other Gospels as well, look at the responses of the people surrounding this crucifixion. There's quite a gathering there, and different Gospels put the focus on different people, but especially those two on either side of him. One of them is like, if you're really all powerful, then free yourself, deliver yourself, and me too. The other thief, recognizing, acknowledging his guilt, says, stop it. You deserve to be here. This man doesn't. And this other thief puts his trust in Jesus. And Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise. So as you read John 18 and 19, experience the grief of it. Get a sense of the pain that's there. But also be encouraged, because my elders were right. That's not the end of the story. He's placed in a borrowed grave belonging to Joseph of Arimathea. Nicodemus, the Pharisee who had come to him at night, he's now a genuine believer. He's part of that burial. It's a beautiful conclusion, but if there's not more than this, it really is the end. And we'll find out about that the next time we talk in a couple of days. We'll see you on Sunday.